Rishabh Pant hit a six today, so massive that it ended up potentially costing India their shot at one of the greatest comebacks in the history of Test cricket. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Stick with me for a moment. India collapsed for 46 runs in the first innings. Sorry for no trigger warnings on that one. Then New Zealand piled on more than 500. Tim Southee alone outscored the entire Indian team, which is something that will always be fun. But because of all that, the pitch became easier to bat on. India came out with a renewed approach. They decided to make runs, and for 86.3 overs, they scored 425 runs and only lost 4 wickets. There was still plenty of batting to come as well, and they'd handled the second new ball, at least the early part of it, quite well. Now it was all about just making enough runs for their bowlers. Then came the 86.3 ball. That is when Rishabh Pant decided to swing for the fences, and he did, perhaps as hard as he's ever hit the ball. And in one magnificent shot, India went from being clear favourites to hanging on by a thread.
Support us on Patreon and help us keep making our content. Join for exclusive perks like the AMAs, the live calls, and to chat with me directly on Discord. You can also enjoy ad-free content, early podcasts, and access to my emailer.
This test is one of the most condition-dependent you'll ever see, and we just saw another one with Pakistan winning that last test. But we knew that the morning would bring about some life into this wicket. But New Zealand had the old ball, and while they bowled well and certainly got some assistance in the morning, they couldn't get a breakthrough. Sarfraz and Pant settled in and just punished the Kiwis, scoring at more than 5 runs and over. Yet it looked like they were just, knocking the ball around. The scoreboard, though, was flying. The question now was whether India should start thinking about whether they needed to declare and how the rain was going to play. They had been as far out as 40-1 at times, and now they were the clear favourites to win the game. Will O'Rourke was spraying the ball everywhere. Ajaz Patel was sent back into hiding, and even Henry and Southee couldn't apply any real pressure. New Zealand ended up resorting to their part-timers, hoping for a miracle as the ball got softer and softer. And that miracle, it never came. So it was all down to the new pill. What was going to happen? Sarfraz, who has never met a ball that he doesn't want to hit behind point for a boundary and had spent most of this game playing these weird dragonfly kisses off his nipples, decides to try and hit the ball through cover, and he gave New Zealand an opening. But having said that, Pant barely noticed. Even with Tim Southee getting some swing, Pant didn't seem to care. Sure, he wasn't playing with his usual manic pixie-like energy, probably because of his knee, but let's be honest, who amongst us hasn't been tempted to slog sweep the new ball when the game gets this tense? It was such a good shot that it broke KL Rahul and Glenn Phillips. And more importantly, it broke India. But first, just a quick little history lesson here. Remember the Ashes at the Oval recently, where there was a ball change? Conspiracy theorists said that England had swapped in a remote-controlled ball straight from the devil's workshop. The truth, as always, is slightly more mundane. There's only a limited selection of balls available at any game. They're usually left over from first-class matches, and they're just marked by the amount of overs they have on them. The umpires then get this case and they have a look at how many overs the balls have had, and then they look at the general wear and tear. That time, they probably grabbed one that was a little bit too fresh, but that isn't exactly uncommon. The difference here was it was at a crucial moment of an Ashes, and Australia's hopes went from alive to none in just a few minutes. And sometimes the opposite happens. Teams are in control and they get a damaged ball replaced, and then suddenly the runs just start flowing. One of my favourite occasions of this was at Chinnaswamy earlier this year. MS Dhoni and Ravi Jadeja were tearing apart the RCB bowlers with a wet ball, which meant that the slow balls couldn't grip. In fact, let me tell you the full story. They needed 63 from 24 to qualify for the finals, which is tough as hell. Then the dew came in, and suddenly they were just tearing up the entire ground. The equation was reduced down to 17 needed from 6. And the first ball of the last over, Dhoni smashed it right out of the ground, and I think it landed in a local beer cafe. So that ball had to be replaced. And right then it seemed like CSK were going to qualify easily. The 11 runs just seemed inevitable. And next delivery, Dhoni tries to take on a slow ball that this time actually grips a little bit in the wicket, and he's out. The next ball, there's another slow ball, also well bowled, and eventually that 11 runs went from inevitable to impossible. So, back to Pant. He got down on his one good knee and he sent the ball flying over the Toblerone, over the fence, over the bottom tier, over the upper deck, the roof, and out of Chinnaswamy all together. And at that point, if they weren't already, India were the favourites for the first time in the match to actually win. To be honest, as a neutral, I'm not a fan of either side, but I just felt like this was India's game at that stage. Because the new ball had come, I thought this was going to be massive for New Zealand. They got 1 wicket, and now it had seemingly been obliterated. But then the umpires dug into their box and they found another new ball. The problem for India was that this pill moved twice as much. The movement off the surface was violent, and the first person to find that out was Rishabh Pant. And his dismissal was likely due to a combination of a few different factors. His knee was clearly bothering him at this point, especially as he just pushed for a risky 2 the previous ball to try and reach his 100. And we all know how much he hates being stuck in the 90s, so he's either grimacing because his knee hurt or he was grimacing because he was stuck on 99. But even if his mind wasn't muddled, O'Rourke's delivery was nasty. It was angled in from around the wicket, it was fast, it was back of a length, then jagged back in violently off the seam. Pant got bat on it, but the ball just dropped back onto his stumps. Now before this, India had added 21 runs for 1 wicket in 6.3 overs with the second new ball. After Pant's 6, they lost 6 for 37 in 13 overs. Now some of that is tail enders, but if you were watching the ball, it went from swinging and seaming and being a little bit difficult for a little while, and them overcoming that, to it suddenly seeming twice as much as before. And this match isn't over yet. India still have to bowl in the morning session, and as we said, conditions dependent, who knows? Defending a lead of around 100 seems unlikely, but with this pitch and these bowlers, I don't know, anything could happen. But India had this match, and perhaps one of the biggest comebacks in the history of Test cricket, in their hands. Then Rishabh Pant hit that 6, and the match just flew away. So right now, somewhere in a park just outside of Chinnaswamy, there is a ball sitting there that might have been India's ticket to victory.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.